Good morning from London. My name is Dan Smith and I'm the Head of Research at AMT, which is a commodities broker and ring dealing member of the London Metal Exchange. So this is week 8 of our regular video series where we're giving an analyst briefing on recent trends for the base metals and looking ahead. And today I'm also going to be talking about the boom in electric vehicles and its impact on base metals. So just a reminder of our key drivers, which we flagged up in previous videos. So we've added here at the bottom the green energy transition. Let me just change my pointer, just give me a moment. So this is something we're going to be focused on this week at the end of in the second part of the presentation. So just a quick recap of what's happened in the past week. We can see that markets have been fairly mixed. So Shanghai equities have rallied after the lunar holiday. However, the S&P 500 is down significantly by a couple of percent here. And this is really because the US stock market is getting a bit nervous about inflation and slowing economic growth. So global stock markets are down by about 1%, and this is mainly because the US, of course, is so important in the global picture. So this kind of highlights here really a key concern for markets. So the US flash PMI numbers came out on Friday for services and manufacturing, and we're showing here services. So it showed a significant slowdown to 49.7 in for flash number for February, and we've had this kind of steady downtrend here into January and February. And then also we had before that also on Friday, the Eurozone flash PMI also showing weakness in terms of services, which of course is a key part of the economy in both these kind of countries and regions. The other key area of focus, of course, for the US is inflation. So the most recent US CPI numbers did surprise on the upside. And this means that markets will be looking pretty close at the core PCE numbers for inflation to come out on Friday for the US. So that will be closely followed by markets, we think, on Friday. So we had a fairly mixed backdrop from financial markets, but the base metals all had a pretty good run in the past week. So up by about 3 to 0.3%. Tin once again leading the way higher, but overall not a reasonably bullish picture for base metals, and this is mainly because we think sentiment is improving in China. And then in terms of the trend so far this year, we can see here quite a lot of divergence actually across the complex, but copper and tin still leading the way higher. Zinc down by a couple of percent so far this year, so we're seeing kind of fundamentals powering markets and making a difference in terms of individual markets. So that's it in terms of the short-term stuff. We'll now switch our focus and talk about some of the underlying structural drivers for base metals. So on Friday we released our latest research piece, Base Metals Get Electric Boost. And what's crystal clear really is that EV sales, electric vehicles, are really booming. And this is helping to lift demand for base metals like aluminium, copper, nickel and tin. So global EV sales were up by 25% last year. And this really largely reflects, as I show here, the transition away from the old-fashioned internal combustion engine here shown in yellow to cleaner vehicles. So all these different types of EV, pure EVs at the bottom here, and then hybrids here in the middle. So according to BNEF forecasts, as we show here, IC internal combustion cars will fall from 75% of the global passenger total in 2023 to just 54% by 2027. So a big transition underway, and EVs in their various different forms are taking up this slack, encouraged by government subsidies and also rapid build out of charging networks. So while this story seems pretty straightforward, there are massive different sizes and types of lithium batteries being used in EVs, well, with at least 18 different technologies in commercial use today. So we've simplified that story a bit here, and we've come up with these three broad categories for lithium battery technologies. So these are NMC, which is nickel, manganese, cobalt, NCA, which is nickel, cobalt, aluminium, and LFP, which is lithium iron phosphate. So these three are the kind of dominating lithium batteries. And what you can see first of all is that nickel and cobalt type batteries, so the NMC and NCA, they took 88% of the market share back in 2015. And in 2020, the story was broadly similar. So these two nickel heavy batteries were dominating the market really in the early days of EV. Since then, we've seen this kind of very rapid upswing towards LFP. So these are no nickel batteries, lithium iron phosphate. And the problem with the early types of EV batteries were that they were nickel and cobalt, of course, are expensive materials, and they're often sourced from unpredictable parts of the world, making life difficult for manufacturers. So by contrast, LFP batteries are based on relatively abundant metals, which meant the prices didn't shoot up in response to improved demand. And the final factor that's been helping LFP is there's been a technology shift in China recently, where the driving range for a single battery charge on that type of batteries has leapt basically, and that's helped to overcome range anxiety for many consumers. So this kind of cheaper battery has meant that EV makers are now able to reach mass market consumers in Asia and Europe for the first time. So in terms of China, China now dominates the EV sector. It's got about 60% of global sales, with Europe a distant second at 23% and the US at 11%. So when we look at China, there's currently not much sign of a slowdown in terms of EV sales. So they were up by 29% last year, and they were still up by 30% in January this year. And this is helped by government subsidies, of course. So in China, the big early winners were pure electric vehicles, with some of these batteries weighing over 500 kilograms. However, as we show here, the transition towards pure EVs has kind of stalled somewhat around about the 40% of the market share, while hybrids or plug-in hybrids has been steadily climbing and now just under 20% of market share. So plug-in hybrids typically have smaller batteries, but they can be 200 to 300 kilograms still. So it's quite difficult to generalize, because the larger the car, of course, the larger the battery, but typically we had very big batteries in pure EVs, kind of pretty large batteries in plug-in hybrids, and then quite small batteries in the actual hybrids, which were popular maybe 5 or 10 years ago. So we're talking about the rapid growth in China. What we've got here is the split between these three different technologies. So you can see here that pure EVs, as I mentioned, the growth rate has steadily slowed from 100% here down to pretty much stalling, really, not much growth in more recently and into last year. On the other hand, here we can see this growth in plug-in hybrids still running at around about 100%, so growing exponentially. And then in terms of gasoline, we can see here that things are generally contracting, and you've got this switch underway away from gasoline towards the electric technologies. So I'm not going to dwell on all these details here because it's all flagged up in the research piece, but of course in terms of the base metals, generally speaking, copper, aluminium, tin, they're all benefiting very significantly from this switch away from gasoline to electric cars. Nickel is quite complicated, so we spoke about this switch towards LFP. That doesn't contain any nickel, whereas a lot of the early EV batteries had quite a lot of nickel in. So it's a complicated story for nickel. Zinc is a pretty neutral story, I think. Lead, definitely things look rather bearish, so The traditional starter battery used in an IC car is being replaced by 12-volt lithium batteries in some cases. So overall, rather bearish, I think, for lead. But it's a fairly mixed picture depending on which market you look at, essentially. So that's it from me. Take a look at the research pieces here, which we've highlighted. So as I say, on Friday we released the piece talking about battery technologies, but other pieces highlighted here. So thank you all very much for listening, and do get in touch if you want to ask any questions about the research. Thanks very much for listening. Speak again next week.